at a
Yeah,
time.
I told him.
I can drink about 3.
3 to 5.
Hey.
Yeah, I have my own house from 1 to 11.
How's your school?
DVs.
Is it?
Yeah.
Andy, are you talking?
Brian too.
That's why Brian. Yeah. Yeah, so he's coming at 1 and he'll walk.
Got my glasses on, I can see that now.
Well, they said faces. Yeah, I never seen her do that. And then I kind of had to freak out when and and so I was freaking out. So I knew the same thing in my room and the yeah, and then there's only one.
I mean, I'm sorry, that's why you did it.
But she's never done something like that. I don't know what it was. It was like the plant or my backpack with the trees.
That's gonna be part of what it's gonna be about 5 years.
But like, yeah, I just could not believe
Probably
it.
cause less stress.
We couldn't stop laughing. She's about to jump off. I just got the picture in time. I mean, it was quick. Yeah. And I'm like, so you're like, yeah. But I'm like in my class. The kids are there. I know, I'm like, no room. But she got you like this. Yeah, so I could touch her, but no, I
Yeah, so I'm not right. Thanks, I appreciate it. How is it? How's mine? Good, how are you?
Good evening, and welcome to the August meeting of the Granville Schools Board of Education. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Yellow, roll please.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
Ms. Keats? Here. Ms. Shaw? Here. Ms. O'Day? Here.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Roll.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. O'Day? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Very good. Best things first, our commendations for a couple wonderful staff meeting members. Thank you for being here for this. And then we've got a couple great presentations after that.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first board meeting of the 2022-2023 school year. So very excited. And we do get to recognize two fantastic teachers. The first award that we're going to recognize is the Transcendia Excellence in Education Award. Transcendia is a leader in custom engineered materials and they sponsor a yearly award for teachers who demonstrate excellence in education, specifically advancing and supporting the use of technology. This year's recipient engages her students in collaborative, complex experiences for all content areas. She strives to stretch their thinking and learning whenever possible, while still making personal connections and meeting their individual needs. She is driven by a whole child mentality that grounds her teaching and interactions with her students and the adults around her. She is highly respected by her peers and her colleagues and by the parents in her classroom. I'm very happy to introduce to you this year's Transcendia Excellence in Education Award winner, GES new kindergarten teacher, Lindsay Miller. Congratulations. Did you get it, Travis? All right, cool. Thank you. Next, we have the Jody Van Tine Award. Jody Van Tine was a second grade teacher at Granville Elementary School from 1977 until the time of her death in March of 1985. During her brief career, Jody was admired, respected, and loved by the many students whose lives she touched as a teacher, their parents, and the teachers and staff from whom she worked with. Jody Van Tine's Outstanding Educator Award was established in 2005 by Jody's father. As in the past, selecting one candidate was a difficult process, but the Granville Education Foundation went through a rigorous process and selected our teacher this year. Here are a few excerpts from the nominations submitted on this teacher's behalf. Miss Weaver, or as the parents like to call her, Dream Weaver, performs nothing short of miracles on a day-to-day basis, not just with one, but 2 kindergarten classrooms. She's a parent's dream. Her communication and detailed weekly newsletters are always appreciated. She goes above and beyond every single day. It's so important to create a positive learning environment for our kindergartners, and she does just that. She helped my second grader build a strong foundation for learning and really fostered his love for math, which he is now excelling. Both of my kids truly loved, and it brings a tear to my eye, that they are so very near to Mrs. Weaver. And she's a daily topic of conversation, apparently. So that's good. We are very happy to announce this year's Jody Van Tine Outstanding Educator Award to another kindergarten teacher, Jessica Weaver. And we are looking forward to our accommodations in the future, where we have all kinds of great things that our students, staff, and community do for Granville schools. So that concludes my report.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. We have a couple of great presentations this evening, starting with an update on our ABI food service.
Yes, John, Chef John, come on up to the podium.
Yeah. Yeah, they look, remember the indicator. It's like baseball signs when she touches it.
Okay.
You want me to
I'll
what I
do-
like?
Yeah. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Harbaugh. I'm the resident director of the kitchens here.
That's the wrong one.
That's
Black
the
one
wrong one.
next to it. Yep.
Little black one.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm coming.
There we go. There you go.
So here's our meal comparison data. The first set of charts is our a la carte equivalencies over the past 4 years. As you can see, red was last year. We blew both meals and a la cartes out of the water. DOD is where we get our government-provided commodities from, and it goes all into fresh produce. We were allocated about $40,000. Flew through that before January. We asked for another 30. Wasn't expecting them to say, yeah, here you go. But they did, so that was awesome. And throughout the whole year, we spent all of that down to the last 28 cents. Good job. SOS is ended. It ended the last day of school last year with no foreseeable coming back for the masses, unfortunately. Some of our compliance, we are still cooking from scratch when possible, batch cooking to ensure a higher quality of food. Local vendors are being used and fresh foods are utilized in the menus, along with all of our a la cartes meeting the Smart Snacks qualifications. Numbers for our school year budget for last year. Actually, yep, no, that was the right one. Sorry. Different numbers right there. I won't go into every single one, but the big takeaway is for the USDA reimbursements, we were budgeted for $476,000. At the end of the year, we topped over $1 million with that. That reimbursement is directly related to the amount of meals we did. So we doubled and more the amount of meals that we were expecting to do.
Is that, oh, okay. Wow.
And for this school year, they upped the reimbursement rates. So if you are still paying for a full meal, that's the reimbursement rate I get per meal from USDA. Same with free, reduced, and on top of that, the state matches 8 cents per meal. Any questions?
Can you go back to that slide? I don't understand.
Which one, this one?
No,
Yeah.
the next one. Can you just explain that one more time?
So students are on a status of free, reduced, or denied.
Right, and denied is?
Denied is full paid.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
All right.
So for every $3 meal that I go out and get to a student, we get an additional 77 cents from the government.
Okay. And then can you, I'm sorry, can you go back again to where it was profit before subsidy? Can you explain that?
Profit before subsidy is just including things before we start taking out managerial fees and administration fees.
So, that $1 million number is an impressive number.
It's a very impressive number.
Right, that's a big number. That's fantastic. So that's savings that's gone directly to parents who've not had to pay for meals.
Absolutely.
Right. What would that, and the numbers over prior year, because the 2021 school year would have also had some SSO funds as well, right?
It would have, yes. I did not include that information in here. The 20 and 21 school year, we also got on the train a bit late. We didn't start SSO until the last week of November, I believe.
Okay.
But there was SSO money involved there as well.
And what's your expectation for this year in terms of meals served and lobby programs and so forth?
I have been very pleasantly shocked. I personally thought our numbers would drastically decline. Today was one of our busiest days we've had in a long time. So that does not seem to be the case. I have noticed the shift from meals back to a la carte, but not as much as I actually thought it would be. They are still focusing on meals.
But I think that's kind of a testament to the quality of food that we have. You know, and it's like maybe kids hadn't tried it much and things like that, but these last couple of years, you know, we've been able to serve a lot of great meals with fresh food and things like that. And I hope that that's, you know, contributing to people understanding what great service we have, because, you know, I truly appreciate it. It's really good food, so thank you. Have a great year. Are we okay on staffing and things like that too? That's always a
Working on it.
challenge.
Better than we were, but we're still working on it.
Fantastic. Good, that's good.
John,
Okay.
excuse me,
Yes.
can you explain what batch cooking is?
Batch cooking is just making sure if you need 100 slices of pizza, 8 o'clock you're not making all 100 slices of pizza for 10:30 lunch. and hoping it makes it to noon lunch. So we're just making sure that we're cooking in small batches to ensure fresh quality.
Thanks.
Thank you, John. And I would also reiterate that we love what you do and the way that you engage students in the process too.
Thank you.
I know it really matters to you and it shows in what you put forth. So thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have a presentation or comments from Andy Wildman and Brian Costa from GRD and the Arts Boosters. So come on up. Go ahead. Andy is the director of the Granville Recreation District, and Brian Costa is our trustee that is associated with the schools. So we adopt him every January. He's been in that position for 4 years?
4 years, my wife thinks it's a lifetime appointment.
That's right.
Very quiet out there.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. So we wanted to come tonight and give a little bit of an update on what's going on with the Granville Recreation District, as well as with the Arts Boosters. My night job is I am blessed to be the president of the Granville Arts Boosters. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but first we're going to start with rec. So we are tracking for a record-breaking year from a programming standpoint. Almost every number we have had program registration-wise is greater than we've had in past years. Our program rate of cancellation this year, over 95% of our programs are running, which is an extremely high percentage run rate in the public rec space. And so we are grateful. We've had just an awesome season, and just want to say, thank you to you, the schools, and the Board of Education. A lot of what we do, we could not do if we didn't have the space that you provide us. So thank you. Another big and exciting part of that is the driver's education program that we rolled out. I don't know who is familiar with that. The rec district started, we are the first in the state of Ohio to offer driver's education through the state of Ohio as a public parks department. The state loves it. I think they'd like to see it come more back into the public space and not really the private space. To date, we have 108 students that have enrolled in the program, 54 of which have completed and passed, and we've had no one who has not. We've had no one who has failed. We've had a couple times when we get knocked on wood, and I'm not teaching. I'm teaching nobody to drive. But it is going fantastic. And again, just want to thank the schools. One of the things that we think makes it work so well and work so well for our students is you can take the class during study hall. And you can also take the class, there's other times when you can take the classes, you can't take it. Well, it's a program that is for residents only, and because we want to be able to tailor make the driving shifts so they work around our kids' busy schedules. And so we are just ecstatic with it. Laura Bedjoder is the one who is spearheading that for us. She has done a fantastic job. I want to thank Coughlin. Kevin Kramer and John Riley have been great. They have signed on as a sponsor for $10,000. And so we just couldn't be happier. It's turned out great. And we are really excited about that, but really all of our programs. I look forward to the end of the year and even next year when we can give a report, because I believe we're going to have record-setting numbers and record-setting revenue for programs. So I'll turn it over to Brian. He's going to talk about some other stuff, and then I'll circle back and talk about arts.
So after I go after Andy, I always this because both of us are talking, we can go on and on for a while. So first I want to thank everyone from the school board. I really do appreciate being your representative for the GRD district. I wear a lot of hats, and this is the hat I wear that I'm most proud of, is just being involved with the community and the schools. Like Andy said, our partnership with you guys is unparalleled, where we go to a bunch of different communities and they have either they don't get to use their stadium or the facilities the way we do. So that goes without saying we're appreciative of that. We're also looking forward to the enrollment study to see how it's going to affect our programming. We're always trying to offer top-notch programming, and like Andy said, our numbers have been through the roof. And with 6 kids myself, 1 in college. This is the last year I'll have 1 in elementary school with 2 of them, and then for the first year in probably 9 years. I don't have any intermediate school for a year, so we're still getting the newsletter because I don't think I could just, not open it. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. I didn't want to have to do that, so. But yeah, just from all the hats I won in the community, I'm really proud to be your guys' representative for the GRD board. Because like I said, I wear that hat proudly, and I appreciate everything that the school board does for us, so.
I'm going to pass. So this is the Arts Boosters financial report. This was as of June. And so it does not include the close of the year because our meeting is in the middle of June. And we did not meet, we traditionally do not meet in July. But I did just want to share this. Memberships are up, or were up last year. We had a really great year in terms of memberships. Some of the other revenue hasn't been completely finished on here just because we haven't got to that point. Like this was pre-lemonade stand. And so there's some things like that that will get added. But just wanted to just share, so on an annual year, the boosters spend somewhere in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, depending on what that year looks like. And those dollars from a revenue perspective come from fundraising, memberships, and concessions. And all three of those kind of play a different sized part in it from year to year. Last year we really tried to get out and talk at every concert to encourage folks to get a membership, and we had great success. This year we're going to target making sure that folks understand that the Board of Education and the superintendent's concession formula really funds so many programs in our community. It funds education, it funds arts, and it funds athletics. And I think sometimes folks don't realize just how that gets divided and how it supports all the arts classrooms. It supports scholarships, it supports awards, it supports all the programs that were Aspire, as well as athletics. And so that's one thing we really want to do is just get out there this year and talk about how when you get that link that pops through and says, hey, we need your help to work a concession stand, if it's a soccer game, don't necessarily just assume it's for soccer, because the Arts Boosters and the Education Foundation have a responsibility to fill a certain percentage of those. So please, keep a lookout for that. We're getting ready to start our new year. Obviously, it's the new school year, which marks the new year for Arts Boosters. We have a couple folks. Dawn Charlton has stepped away this year for personal timing reasons. Dawn has been great. We're going to miss him and hope he comes back at some point. But we're working with Mr. Holtzberry and Mrs. Hunkins, so we're going to get a couple new members, which is great. I think there's like a born-on date on me. My daughter's a freshman now, and so I probably will turn into a pumpkin at some point in time. So just, really excited. I want to thank the Board of Education and the superintendent and the treasurer for coming alongside us for the Theater Lights project. That was a really exciting project, and certainly happy to contribute almost $17,000 for that. That's a home run in terms of just supporting every student. Everybody uses the theater, and so it's going to be great. This Friday night, a very big night going down at Walter J. Hodges Stadium. Superintendent Brown kicks off his stadium tour. I don't know if anyone has heard this or not, but he kicks off his stadium tour. The Ohio University Marching 110 is going to be in town.
Oh yeah.
Vice President Wolf can assure you that you will not be disappointed in their show. It's going to be a super fun night, and so hopefully, and it's going to be a great football game too. So hopefully, everybody can make it down and check out all that good stuff. Any questions about the Arts Boosters or the rep for me?
I just like to compliment you, Andy, and the Arts Boosters, Amanda Schneider with the Athletic Boosters, and Amy Sanders at GEF for really making a concerted effort to get out there and talk to people about how this collaboration works, and really emphasizing it's not, and trying to get out of this whole idea of silos. It's to help out Blue Aces students. It's not just necessarily you're an athletic parent or a band parent, or it doesn't matter. It's helping all the kids. And I don't have to say this to anybody. I mean, at least my kids were this way You could have said they were in arts, in arts or athletics. They're multifaceted,
Yep.
which is great. So I just commend you guys for really making a concerted effort to get that out and educating folks on how it works. So thank you.
I also really feel people are just ready to get back out and engage. It seems like in some of the years past, we were like, when you get people to volunteer, like, I could hardly get a spot to shake up. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're all gotta get out there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that people are ready to re-engage, and our support organizations are so fantastic at providing opportunities where you can, really do positive things for all the kids in the school. So thanks for all your dedication to that. I hope that continues to build this year.
Thank you. I am extremely passionate about it. So
Yeah,
that's great.
for sure. Yes.
Anything else? All right.
Andy, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate the partnership in
Right.
both capacities.
Yeah.
Okay, next I'd like to introduce Karen Daniel Hamburg, who is from Cooperative Strategies. This is probably the report that a lot of people have been waiting for to hear. So I'm going to turn off the lights so that you can speak. And Glenn, is that clicker now working, or is it?
Because it's a PDF, you'll have to play with it. You might have to actually scroll it.
I will talk louder because we have people watching too.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I will
Thank you.
talk as loud as I can. All right. Well, my name is Karen Daniel Hamburg. I work for Cooperative Strategies. We're a K-12 planning firm out of Hilliard, Ohio. And I'm excited to be here. It's not often I get to say that I'm looking for a home in the district that I get to work. So I really enjoyed looking at your housing.
You just gotta do this.
Sure. Oh, that's great. All right. So I'm going to go over the capacity study first, then the enrollment projections, and then the housing. I know the housing is the most exciting, but bear with me and let's get through this one because it all wraps up at the end. So we did a capacity study of your facilities, and what that included was collecting floor plans and facility data from district officials. We did on-site assessments, so we had someone, it wasn't me, but we had someone walk through every one of your buildings, go to every classroom, take a look, make sure we're utilizing it, and all of those things. And we also did principal interviews just to figure out any special programming, building considerations, and confirm any group uses, because we also received master schedules. So we wanted to make sure that we had everything right within the report. These are just some definitions. If you've looked at the report, you would have already seen these. I'm going to move past this because I think I can explain them pretty well. Before I get into the actual capacity of your buildings, I do just want to go over the calculations because they differ ever so slightly. For the elementary and intermediate school, all we do is we take the total number of homeroom classrooms, so we're not talking specials or art, music, global studies, anything like that, just your typical kindergarten, first, second, third, or fourth and fifth, sixth grade. And we add it up with any special education classrooms, and we multiply those by the class size. It's as easy as that. So if you have 25 classrooms multiplied by 25, okay, that's going to be your capacity. For the middle and high, it's a little bit different because teachers do have planning periods. So when students leave the room, they typically refill that room. But there is one period of the day that that room is not utilized, so we have to apply a utilization factor. The formula is pretty similar. You take the standard classroom, multiplied by the class size, special ed, multiplied by the class size, and then extracurriculars, multiplied by the class size, add those together, and then we multiply it by a scheduling factor of 86%. So that's 7 periods in the day, 1 period is empty. We're assuming every classroom is empty 1 period of the day for that planning period. So we also looked at program and design capacity. Just as I go through this, your program and design capacities are identical because we're using the buildings exactly as they were designed. Sometimes you can have classrooms that are being used as a resource room or an art room or something that does not receive capacity. So this is just demonstrating, okay, we have 6 classrooms in a hallway. If they were designed, if they're used as they were designed, we have a capacity of 132. If we take one of those classrooms and we make one of them a special ed room, we only have a capacity of 10 in that room. A resource room doesn't have any capacity, so all of a sudden our 132 hallway becomes 98. So just keep that in mind as I go through it. These are the capacities for the elementary and middle school. And let me just point out what everything is. So right here we have our total building classrooms. This is just looking at a floor plan, 1, 2, 3, counting them. 35 of them at the elementary school are used as standard classrooms. We have 1 special ed self-contained, and then 3 specialty spaces that do not receive capacity. At the intermediate school, you have 30 classrooms total. 25 of them are going to be those standard classrooms, homerooms. 1 is a special ed self-contained, and then we have 4 specialty spaces. So, again, the only difference is going to be Granville Intermediate. It looks like has 1 more standard classroom in its design capacity. So, the program capacity for Granville Elementary is going to be 802. It can fit 802 students. For the intermediate school, it's 610. For the design capacity, again, Granville Elementary is 802. That building is being utilized exactly as it was designed. Granville Intermediate actually has an extra classroom. You can see there's 1 extra 25 in there. So don't exactly know where that came from. But if you look at the program capacity utilization over here, this is what your buildings are utilized at. That 89% you're in great shape. 95, you're still in great shape, but you are approaching overutilization.
And the only thing that I would add to that slide is capacity at 802, that also factored in the extra building that we opened.
Yes.
So in the past, you'd see program capacity around, I think we had like 760, and now it's at 802.
That's the new kindergarten facility that
Yes.
was repurposed?
Yes,
to get
exactly.
New classrooms.
And something else to note is we also accounted for those half-day kindergarten classrooms, so we give those a higher capacity because we have 2 cohorts going through it throughout the day. All right, so at the middle and high, again, this is when we use that scheduling factor of 86%. At the middle school, you have 26 total building classrooms. 25 of them are used as regular classrooms. We have 1 special ed, self-contained. With that 86% scheduling factor for the program capacity, you're going to have a capacity of 544. And at the high school, it's 972. You are a little bit less utilized at the middle school and high school. That's not a bad thing. You're at 78% for the middle school. So right in line, you're utilizing it very well. High school, same thing. You're utilizing the high school very well.
So you've seen these for a lot of different school districts and things like that, like when it hits 100%, is that when like trailers get involved, or there's school districts that operate kind of above and below 100, or what's kind of our metrics that you should be thinking about in terms of tapping out the buildings gap?
So it really depends. At the high school and middle school, there are certain scheduling factors you can change things to give more capacity. If teachers are on a cart, which is not popular, but if you put teachers on a cart, then you can utilize those rooms 100% of the day. You can also reclaim other spaces. You can put more students in maybe a PE class at the same time. There's more flexibility at the secondary level than there is at the elementary.
It doesn't sound ideal for this community, is what I'm hearing. That is my opinion.
School districts do not enjoy doing that kind of scheduling.
And I think we've kind of known, from a capacity, we've kind of known this, we've kind of felt this, we know we're kind of about tapped out and things like that, and, depending on the level of growth and things, that's going to drive the facility needs.
Absolutely.
Well,
But it's really nice to have this official study, because
Yes.
we've really never had this level of formality to the counting of rooms, and so that's really valuable.
And I think right now, our middle school, our high school enrollment is at a lower point than it's been. It's been significantly higher over the last, couple of years. We're at a low point, but now our elementaries are higher. And so we do go in waves at times, but what we've tried to maintain is just incremental growth over time. And you're going to get into that in a little bit, and that actually bears out in some of the metrics.
So moving on to the enrollment projections. We have 2 separate projections. Think of them as apples and oranges. They're completely separate methodologies, so we have to not get them confused because the numbers are not going to match, and they should not match just based on methodologies. So what we did with the projections is provided a 10-year enrollment projection by grade for the entire district. You only have 1 boundary, so that makes sense to do it that way. We developed these using the cohort survival method. And an image of the cohort survival method is right here. So over time, we look at kindergartners as they move on to 1st grade, and then that same cohort as they move on to 2nd grade, and so on. And we captured that in a big table that I will show you shortly. But what we do is we use historical live birth data, which means if a baby is born to a mother who lives here, they're counted here. It doesn't matter if they go to Grant Hospital to deliver, the child is counted here. So we use the live birth data and the historical enrollment. We have 10 years of your historical enrollment by grade to go through time, kind of figure out those survival ratios, which is what we call those cohorts moving from year to year. And then we look at projection ratios, which uses those to project enrollment. So the only direct inputs into the enrollment projections are those live births and the historical enrollment. We also look at housing. Of course, we looked at housing for the student potential study, but we look at it for this as well, and any census data sets, which you'll see in the report. So this is your birth data. As you can see, the vast majority of your district falls within this 43023, which is this column right here. So you can see the number of births back to 2004. You're teetering around 100 or so. If we look at this chart right here, you can really see the lack of concrete trend in the birth data. Back in the early 2000s, like between 2005 and 2010, they were relatively high, then kind of taper off, now they're growing again, and then they shrink. So that is an issue we ran into with your birth data, and I'm going to explain that a little bit in further detail because it is, your births do not necessarily follow a trend to kindergarten.
Because, I mean, if you have 100 births a year, and you have 200 kids a year, you must get them somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So only half of the kids in our schools are born here, if
And-
you think about it that way in the first couple of grades. roughly.
And let me show you it's even less.
Yeah.
If you look at this right here, this is your birth to kindergarten. So kids are born 5 years later, we're only showing 19.57 of those kids in your kindergarten class. So
What's that mean?
They're coming from outside.
yes, that means people are moving in. And we did a separate analysis, which I have yet to share with Jeff, but we did a separate analysis looking at when students are moving in, and it's very clear that families are moving in pretty much right before kindergarten.
So that's tracking actual kids, so many kids have moved out before kindergarten, is what that's saying? Because, I mean, if we have 100 births per year, and we have 200 kids per grade, you would think that would be like 50%.
It's a little different because we're combining those zip codes, and we're not using all of them. If you look at that zip code map, slides, you can see we have,
Oh.
there's portions not in your zip code.
And you can include just those portions, basically?
Yes.
Huh.
We try to, as much as possible, comparing it to the housing and where kids are and things like that.
That sounds like a number's a little funny, though. And do you include all those zip codes?
No,
Oh,
goodness,
just-
no. No, there's no reason to include like
Right.
43056.
Okay. But there's, again, 80 or 100 kids born per year, according to the previous slide.
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologize, I'm not in charge of the enrollment projections, so I'm not totally up to snuff on this. But what it shows, the more important ones to show here are going to be these 1 to 2, 2 to 3. So it's showing, so in 2012, 2013, from grades 1 to 2, you had 112, meaning you had an increase that year. The next year, 2 to 3, it was 103, and you can see the classes as they kind of move through. If you look at it,
Is that the percent of increase?
that is the percent from that year. So if I had a class of 100, and then the next year it's 110, the survival ratio would be 110.
So that's move-ins.
Yes.
Right.
Likely, actually, yeah, I would have to do movements.
Right.
So this is your historical enrollment district-wide. We conditionally formatted this to show any like relative highs and lows. Anything in darker blue is going to be lower. Anything in like the red is going to be higher. So you can see we have a pretty big class moving through right now. Those are the kindergartners, or the 5th graders in 2012, 2013. So that puts us last year's graduating class was a pretty big class moving through. You can also see lower enrollments toward the top. We do believe that you're at the start of a new trend, which does not include lower enrollments at the elementary level. And I will get to that shortly. We do have an alternative model we're working on with the enrollment projection because of your big kindergarten class this year. Last I checked, it was around 180 students in your kindergarten class, and we did not project nearly that much. So we are looking at an alternative model to account for that because we believe you're starting a new trend. Along with this, we also looked at students attending community schools. Last year there were 34. we had 33 students open enrolling out of Granville schools, and then we had 109 students homeschooling. The homeschool is a little bit interesting to look at. You can see in 2020, so COVID, you can see a huge hit, and then we're kind of declining last year from that.
Do you know what grades the homeschooling were most people are?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. I can check though. I may have some.
Historically, it leans more elementary school.
Yeah,
right?
it needs more
Parents
elementary.
bring their
Brian
kids in.
manages that, so, all right.
Yes. K6, K8, yeah.
So from our original projections, just looking at the historical birth data and that cohort survival method, we are projecting growth. I don't think that's going to be very shocking to anybody. Now the level of growth will likely change with this next round of projections when we do that alternative model, but these are the by grade numbers for that first model that we're running. So as you can see, 22, 23, using those trends and using the data that we had, we projected 146. That's obviously low. That's why we're looking at that alternative model. Something I do want to note though is last year's kindergarten class is huge. You can see as they go through the district, so they're the first graders in 22, 23, so this year's first graders. You can see as they age, they're up to 279. That is a class size that's unheard of in this district. So it's coming, their growth is happening, it's just a matter of capturing that. A couple things to note about the enrollment projections. It is important to continue to monitor it, especially because you are starting these new trends. You do have us for 3 years on a 3-year contract, so we will be updating these. We'll likely give you a new projection pretty soon. And once we get those in October enrollment, we can get you your data so you can start planning for those. Some factors that can also cause significant changes in enrollment and cause the projections to be way off, and boundary adjustments, like we don't have that yet. New school openings, school closures, changes in programming, preschool programs, grade configuration changes, any interest rates or unemployment shifts, any transfers, private schools opening or closing, zoning changes, annexations, unplanned new housing, planned but not built housing. That's talking about birth building permits. I can get a building permit for this site today and not built for 30 years, and I still have my building permit. Any school voucher programs, and obviously pandemics can cause big disruptions in enrollment.
What are boundary adjustments typically, or how often do those happen, and what circumstances? What does that mean?
That doesn't apply to you as much just because you don't have multiple elementary schools or middle schools. Think of
So
like,
it's when you, within your district, adjust things that might change enrollment actually, or just?
well, it should change enrollment. If you're changing a boundary, you should be changing enrollment because maybe one school's overutilized and another school needs more enrollment or something like that. If you had multiple elementary schools and you had boundaries, let's say you had 4 elementary schools and your district was broken up into quadrants, any change to those boundaries would cause some changes in enrollment.
Just internally though?
Yeah.
Yeah, just internally.
All right, so on to the housing study. And bear with me here, this is kind of a lot of information. It took me months to go through this. So we do use a different methodology in the enrollment projections, as I mentioned before, again, apples and oranges here. The student potential, so the housing study looks at student yields rather than that cohort survival method. So if you look at this image right here, that's 10 homes, and we have 5 children in there. That gives us this yield of 0.5. So what we do is apply that 0.5 to any future homes. We do take this a little bit further and look at the student yields by the age of home. So what we do with that is we can apply a timeline to any housing to see when you're really going to get that bulk of students. And that is what this is. So what this on the left shows is your student yields by age of home, by assessed value. Okay? The more important home to look at is this far one here. This shows the total. So as you look at this, as we go up in time, it is going vertical. So this is year 1. Year 1, a lot of times the county just doesn't have the data finalized at that point. So certainly homes were built in 2021. The data is just not final. That's why we're showing a yield of 0. But beyond that, you can really see a clear trend. As a home ages, it gets more and more students start coming out of it. In Granville, you have an exceptionally high yield. I have never seen a yield model hit 2 students per household naturally. OLNTNG is close, but it's very impressive the number of students you have coming in. And I imagine that is because of the great reputation Granville has.
I don't really understand that at all, but what I'm asking is the gist of it just that we have 2 students per home is how you're getting the information you're taking from that and then applying it?
At the absolute maximum.
But only at a certain period of time.
That is not standard. Let me explain. So, if you look at this gray right here, these are the actual yields. So, year 1, ignore the 1. Year 2, you're showing you 1.2 students per house. So, what I'm saying is, what we can do with that is say every 2-year-old home in the district, we can apply a yield of 0.12 to it to project the number of students. You can see though,
Okay, so year 1 is the year the house is built.
Yes.
And you're basing how many students live in that house based on when the house was built.
Yes, and this is your data.
Right.
This is your information.
As houses get older, more students get out of it.
Yes.
And that data comes from our historical build rates and historical enrollment.
Yes. Yes.
Right, so it might have been like influenced by things like our trails, right? Like when
Oh,
our trails was built, right, that probably is kind of where the data for this analysis is coming from, because that's the majority of the houses that have been built,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at
But
just
so
the numbers
we're-
perspective.
You could sort of extrapolate that those houses were being bought by people who didn't have children at that point?
So
Yes and no. So,
they had 1.2 children.
Okay,
correct.
got it. They had more children as they
When
went
they
to
were
the
built.
house.
When they
Okay.
were built,
They were built,
when they were
right.
built.
And then a couple years later, you're looking at 2, so they likely had either had a toddler when they bought the house, or they had a baby and became.
Thank you.
The most
Yes.
important thing to note with this
Yes.
is that when a home is built, it is not immediately exploding with children. That is a huge misconception that when a home is built, 5 kids are going to come out of it, and that's
Okay.
what the school district needs to plan to. Definitely not the case.
Okay.
When a home is built, we're looking at a much lower yield. But then, as we get to year like 10 or 11, we're looking at incredibly high yields. This is very high. We're talking K-12 students total. So when I say 1.2 students per home, I'm talking 1.2 K-12 students. But you can see over time, the age, once we get to that 11 or 12, things start tapering off. And you can really see that trend of decreasing enrollment. Once we hit year 35, things become much more transient. People are moving and things like that. We do see a little bit of that turnover right here, around year 18. Is that kind
So
of makes
the year the
sense?
house was built as opposed to the year a family moves in?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
It'd be interesting to look at the other way though, right? Because I think we have a lot of old houses, right, that families move into with kids and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't have that in the slide, but I do have that information based on the most recent home transaction.
It'd be interesting.
I would also point out that we have a lot of gray to the left, which is, housing that does not fall in the 0 to 250,000 or 300,000 range. So most of our homes are more expensive to buy. Obviously, everyone knows that, but I think empirically we can show that now.
And I do think it's important to note that I did include anything that wasn't yielding any students in here. So we're saying homes really don't exist in Granville in this category. It's not that there's no students coming out because we have these zeros every once in a while. It's that they don't exist anymore. That is based on the assessed value of the home for the King County.
I see a lot of like color rectangles, I can't discern right to left in the price range of the homes, if there's a statistically significant difference one way or the other. Do you sense that like
Not,
expensive homes have more kids or less expensive homes have more kids, or not?
Not so
That's not
much.
really a factor.
sometimes it is, but not so much in Granville.
Okay.
And do you have the data on, like, as homeowners age, do they stay in the community without kids in the household? Or do you have the data on, like, the rate of people leaving the community?
So that's in my extra table that I did not have in here, but we can certainly share it with you.
We've speculated a lot about that, and I'm really curious, so.
Yeah, my table does show that it's school district, people are coming in when they have kids.
Use the school and.
Yeah, it's a very good trend. So, the map on the left here shows your existing housing. So anything in green is going to be single family. Your condos are in purple. You don't have that many condos, but you can kind of see every, like in downtown, there's a couple. And then we do have apartments as well. There's a couple of apartment complexes. I didn't include any of the university housing, as I would assume that you don't have a lot of students, or your students may have that housing. Looking at the total yields for apartments, we're at 0.18 students per unit. That's fairly standard. That's pretty much what we're seeing in most of Central Ohio. Condos, you're looking at 0.05 student yield. Again, that's fairly standard. That's pretty similar. You do have a pretty low sample size of those two, so that's something to keep in mind. Those may not be as reliable just because you have so few of those units. We also looked at apartments by bedroom, and it was pretty clear that 2-bedroom apartments yield way more kids. 3-bedroom, you only have 8 of those units in the entire district, so they're yielding a couple of students, but the 1-bedrooms really aren't doing anything. On the right here, we have the housing by year built. So I always think this is kind of interesting. This shows anything in the red is going to be homes that were built more recently, and in blue, older. So you can see Park Trails over here, as we were talking about, is bright red that was built pretty recently. There's a couple of subdivisions too, down on the north or southwest side that were built fairly recently.
Stone Creek.
Yeah. So I see a number there, like total number of units, 3,075, right? I think we have a lot more houses than that.
That's what I was just thinking, does that
That's
say
like-
2,711 single-family homes?
Correct, but that's subdivided single family. We're only talking about subdivided because the non-subdivided is mostly beyond our field
What's the
model.
subdivided mean?
Subdivided means like,
A PUD or a plot, or a plat.
yeah, like Park Trails. If you go into Park Trails, you know how the roads are all winding and all the houses look kind of similar.
Yeah.
That would be a subdivision.
So those are not included in here?
No, they are. That is what is included.
So the rural area, like Loudon Street homes are not included in this?
We looked at them, but because most of them are older than 35 years, they didn't fall within our yield model.
Oh, so this is all homes less than 35 years old,
Yes.
not the number of
Yes.
homes.
Correct.
Yeah, because I think we got like 6,000 addresses or something like that.
Well,
Like,
that's important to note too, because addresses don't necessarily mean homes.
Yeah. I think about it as like homes with registered voters. If you print out all the addresses of registered voters, which some people might be inclined to do, right, you're going to end up with like 4,000 or 5,000 for some reason or whatever. I'm just kind of curious, that's different than this 3,000 number. I don't know how to.
That's just subdivided. It's subdivided. That is the main difference.
Right. So if there's 3,000, there's 5,000 total, there's 2,000 homes that are more than 35 years old. Is that what that tells me?
The 35 is irrelevant. I'm only saying the 35 because most of the homes that are in the rural land, the
Okay, so
rural
there's-
areas are older than 35, they're beyond our yield model.
Right.
So
So
they
so
wouldn't-
there's 2,000 homes that are not subdivided, they're in the township and they're older.
Sure. But they don't have those trends we've been looking at.
Oh, I see. I just
They're
hope we
beyond.
rationalize this number. Yeah, that makes sense.
Is that just because you're expecting less students in those homes?
It's because once as a home reaches that maturity, that age 35, we don't see the same trend. We usually see pretty flat enrollment for those homes. If families move out, move in, it really doesn't change the yield as much. Those new homes are way more volatile.
I would think there's still, like if there's a 100-year-old home in the village or the township or whatever, somebody might move in with kids, the same way that they
Village is
would build
different.
with
We included
kids.
all of the village, all the single family homes in the village.
You did include those.
We did include those. Those are included in that single family. So anything in green in this map is included in that single family number. So we did include the village homes.
Despite the date of the house being correct.
But the homes in the township, you don't assume follow that trend, and we don't track that.
Definitely not. I don't assume, I know that they don't. We looked at
Karen,
that.
can you go back one? I think the other thing to note is the units, single-family units by age. And so you see from 2000 to 2005, you had a lot of units added. That's Park Trails.
Yeah.
Okay?
This is nearly 600.
But on average, we're trending about 20 units a year right now. So that's important to factor into because that you're going to hear that down the road.
Okay.
How many units per year factors into the yield that we get as far as the numbers are concerned.
Correct. So looking at development, and this may be shocking, there is not a ton of confirmed development right now. Right now is the key word when I say that because it is coming. It's just a matter of when. So the only two developments that are on the docket right now are Mockingbird Hill, that's up in that corner, you can see over there, and then Willow Bend is right in here. This is over by River Road. So there are two other developments going on right now. So Courtyard at Cherry Valley and Glenshire, both of those are age restricted. So we're not expecting to get students out of those. Those are the best kind of housing for school districts.
Oh, wow. Now it's age restricted to 55 plus?
So we also looked at land use for this, because part of our analysis was doing an entire build-out study for the district. We want to be aware of what your enrollment could look like should building start happening a lot quicker than it is today. So as you can see over on the map on the left, this is your land use. Much of your district is agricultural right now. That is the vast majority of the land. Should zoning change and things like that, which I imagine could happen, I imagine that residential is only going to increase year after year. On the right here, we have the vacant developable land. So this is part of that build-out study. We also identified any tracts of land that were likely to develop sooner rather than later. This includes any land being actively pursued or already owned by a developer, any land that has previously been denied a development plan, like Eaton Woods, I think it was called, that is no longer going on, but that land is still there, it still exists, it can be developed. Any land that's adjacent to existing sewer and water infrastructure, you are in a little bit of an odd situation just because Granville does not extend water and sewer willingly. So there's not as much of a threat to that unless annexations come in. And then again, land for high potential for annexations. That would be like this parcel over here that might be developed or might be annexed into Heath or something along those lines.
Is that the Union Township?
Yeah, that's.
This is a Union Township,
Yeah,
yes.
it's on the third of the district, that was Union Township.
And then
Sorry, what's the giant chunk up there?
that one, so we've been told that that won't develop, but do not have a lot of faith in that. So we wanted to include it in the analysis because if it should develop, it will have a big impact. That's a lot of land up there.
It was slated for development.
It's at one point, and then it changed hands. So I can tell you who owns it later, not publicly, but.
Yeah, that was just.
It's one to keep an eye on.
What's the acreage there, do you know?
I would imagine a couple hundred.
Yeah, I think it's more like 250 acres.
Yeah, and it's very close to Newark, which is also concerning.
And that big center one?
This one, I believe, is owned by Uncle and Company, which a lot of times is eventual development. We did take a look at the land trust for Granville, and none of the parcels you see in this are included in that, so we made sure to look at that. We also looked at floodplains because a lot of times developers won't even go for a floodplain because it's just too much of a mess. So this analysis, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so basically this is the data that you use to help build, like the potential build out of that?
Correct.
Like how do we, yeah, okay.
I will get to that shortly. So I have two models to show you, and in the report I have 4 different models, but these ones are the two that I feel are most likely. So the models show different numbers of units being released per year. We release the units that are already under development based on developer timeline. So if a developer tells me they're going to build 10 units this year and 10 units next year, great, I have that information, I can plug that right in. The one that's a little bit tricky is the hill that is buy your lot and then build a custom home on it, so we can't really predict. We have a 5-year build out for that one. Looking beyond that, the 40 units per year means we're building 40 units a year out of that vacant land. We started with the land for high potential, so that's what this block is. And this block right here shows your existing single family. So once we put all of your existing single family subdivided homes through that yield model, we're showing a decline. That's because those homes already exist. Many of them are already partially through the yield model. They're already on the year like 14 or 15, so they're approaching their end. This is all of the non-subdivided single family. So this is what you were asking about earlier. The vast majority of these homes are already older than 35. They're beyond our yield model, so we leave them flat. Multifamily is usually very transient. That is much harder to predict ebbs and flows with that one, so we do leave that flat for the number of units that you have. If you were to have any developing multifamily, we would of course apply that 0.18 or 0.05 to those. You have very few students coming from out of district, but we do have enough to make a small little line right here. And then this gray block is what I really want you to pay attention to. This is that high potential land. So this is land that will likely turn into development at some point in the future. What we did is we released that at 40 units a year, and this is what your enrollment looks like. So about, let's see, 20 years out, you're reaching 3,000 students. Your peak is going to be around 2063, and you're just probably 3,500
New students, 3,500 new students? Or
total enrollment. The blue on top.
40 years from now.
Correct. Yeah. The blue on top of this is the entire build-out study. So if we look at this on the right, the high potential, these yellow and orange are going to be the gray block. The blue is going to be that blue block. So these are less likely to develop in the near future, but should they develop in the further out future, this is what your total enrollment could get up to. So if all of those homes develop at 40 units a year, you're looking at almost a 5,000 student enrollment total.
With existing zoning.
With existing zoning, yes. And that does include the 5-acre variance for both the townships. Newark and NC both have much smaller density requirements, so I think we could disclose at about like a unit an acre, a unit an acre, just to account for any green space and roads and things like that.
Can I ask why you are projecting 40 units a year when one unit could produce like 500 homes? I mean, one plot could
Units
potentially.
house.
I know, I mean, one plot.
It's
of
based on
land.
the acreage. It's based on the acreage of that block.
Okay.
So the units, if I have, let's say I have a 40 unit or a 40 acre lot and it's in Newark, I'm going to release 40 units out of that.
Yeah.
If in some of those larger areas, like this, if that's, let's say that's 300 acres,
Yeah.
and it ends up being annexed into Newark, then we can probably expect 300 homes or more.
That's what I mean,
That one.
yeah.
We release them appropriately.
Okay.
It's not, I'm not counting one. This is probably like 25, 10 or so. And it's all based on the acreage of that lot.
And 40 units a year is also based on the fact that developers are going to build a certain amount each year. They're not just going to get the 250 acres and boom, start getting those houses all over there.
And those are based on these numbers. The assumption was that 30 is right around your average right now. That's only going to increase, which is why we put it at 40.
Yeah, I imagine until it could get much higher.
Is there any-
And we have 4 different models in the report. I'm only showing you 2 of them. And my next one is 60.
How are you allowing for potentially unbuildable property?
Like the Rockford homes over here.
Or like floodplain, or like
We
land
have
that's not
it, so-
obviously kind of locked up in some other way.
What about land that's in a conservation easement? Like,
That's not included in any of
Okay.
this. No. We made sure not to include any of those tracts of land. Anything that is in a floodplain, I have a layer on my GIS. All I had to do was look and make sure that nothing was falling into that. I think I included 500 here, but I did not include 100 here. Floodplains. So this is if the district were to develop 60 single-family units a year. So similar trends on the bottom half. Again, this is running through the same yield model, so all of these are going to be exactly the same. The difference is going to be this gray and blue. So should 60 units be built out of that high potential land for the foreseeable future until it's all built out, we're looking at a max yield of around 3,700 in year 2050. Now, should additional land develop, some more of that vacant developable land that we didn't slate for high potential, then you're looking at an enrollment of around probably 5,400 around the same time, so it would be like 2059 or so. And it all depends on how many units are built per year.
Might be helpful for me to have this chart in a different scale, because I just can't think 130 years in the future. I'm trying to plan here 5 or 10, right? Which I think we need to plan longer than that. But it might be interesting to just have a slice of this in a nearer term future to facilitate conversations, because I think I might see this as, oh my God, we need twice as many schools, right? Well, yeah, that's true in 40 years, right? Depending on what happens, who knows what's going to happen. But we really need to plan for the next 5 or 10, right? And be super certain about that. So that would be helpful to find a way to rescale it as well.
In the report, we do have a table that has it year by year.
Great.
The exact number, the number of out of every single category.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get an idea. I think the most important one to pay attention to is going to be the land that we decided was high potential.
Yeah.
This is less likely, this blue up here, it is still likely, but it's less likely than that high potential land. That's what I would really focus on for the time being until you start seeing more of that land.
What drives the reduction in the green bar again? The bottom.
Sure. It's, most of your homes are like right in this part of the yield model, so we're putting every single home into the yield model based on how old they currently are. So if homes are 15 years old, we started here. And as it goes through the yield model, it only decreases. This trend is incredibly common.
Okay.
Your yields are higher than most, and I'll show you that in just a minute, but there is a trend across the country of when a home is built, increasing enrollment. It hits its peak around 10 to 15 years usually, and then it tapers off.
So this is pretty typical curves and things like that, and this is kind of what you see, but the magnitude is a little different.
Correct. And I have a comparison to show you, because I think it's pretty fascinating.
Okay.
Karen, the other thing that I think is interesting is that blue is less likely, but possible,
Yes.
because like water and sewer aren't at Stone Creek, and yet that subdivision still exists. So, I think it's important to realize, like, if there's a bill, there's a way,
Yes.
so to speak, and that it's been done before.
Yeah, the majority of the homes, like here down, are on septic and their own personal wells. So a lot of these homes that are a little bit bigger lot, things like that, they're totally capable. They do not need to be on sewer, and that is something different from a lot of other school districts. A lot of times the sewer feeds the growth, but in this case it's not necessary, and developers don't seem to really care because they can sell their houses regardless.
There's no way to correlate like home value with these numbers as well, right? Because that's what drives our property tax revenue, right? Because if you think about the houses in the bigger.
That's the value up there.
And keep in mind, the assessed value of the home, I believe in Lincoln County is 30% less than what they deem the market value. So who knows what it would actually sell at, but that's just what the county says. So.
Because I think that's the big assumption we need to make, is not only what the rate is, but what the value of the home is, right? Because the value of the home, almost as much or maybe more than the rate, drives our revenue.
Oh, definitely.
Right? You know, if you put in a $300,000 home versus $1 million home, you get 3 times the money from a $1 million home, which has very different implications for our sustainable finances.
So this slide shows a yield comparison from other districts we worked in across Central Ohio. So you can see this blue thick line is going to be you. You have a much higher, as we mentioned, a higher magnitude with your yield. Very similar trend across the Columbus area. You're just way higher than everybody else. So Granville, you're right here. This is your yield model. Olentangy is the next closest comparable. I would say probably 10 years ago, Olentangy was a little bit closer to you guys. But they have since kind of slowed down with their growth, so you can see them right here. Dublin is in green. I tried to color these based on their school colors. Gahanna's in yellow. Hilliard is in this blue right here. Then Pickerington is this purple. Reynoldsburg is the blue, and then South Mississippi is the orange because I already used yellow. So you can just get an idea of how you compare to other districts.
And this is a curve fit from the past 35 years. So you look at the past 35 years, age of those houses, enrollment, the results from them, and that's how you get this number.
We did exact same study. We looked at the year every home was built, compared the number of students to that, and looked at that. In terms of overall yield, I included some different types of housing that you do not have, but I thought it was interesting to include. So apartments, you're 0.18, as I mentioned before, you're really right in line. Pickerington does have a higher apartment yield. For whatever reason, they have a lot more apartments than we do anyways. Condos, again, you're 0.05. Condos tend to be pretty low anyways. Mobile home parks, you don't have any of these, but that's what the yields look like across just across Central Ohio. Townhomes, your townhomes were included with condos in this case, so you don't have any of these in here. And then our single family yield. So you are in second place at 0.69 overall. So that's every single student that lives in a single family home divided by every single family home, this is at 0.69. If you look at Olentangy, they're 0.81. You can see their yield model is a little lower. If I were to extend the yield model another 50 years, Olentangy would be steadily higher than you, which is why that they are a little bit higher in yield.
And that's for the 35-year-old and houses and less.
Yeah. So what does this mean for you and your schools? Looking at all of the schools, so I used our program capacity that we came up with. 21, 22, this is what we're looking at in terms of enrollment. And then 22, 23, you can see using the cohort survival method, which is up top, what your enrollments look like. So by 10 years out, we are looking at, let's see, 86%, 102, 85, and 99. Now, again, we are going to look at those enrollment projections because of that big kindergarten class, and I imagine a lot of those numbers are going to be over 100 as soon as we do that. Looking at the student potential, so using that student yield analysis that we talked about, 36, 37, and this is done in 5-year increments. You can see 36, 37, we're at 122% at the elementary, 120 at the intermediate, 90 at the high school, or 90 at the middle school, and 100 at the high school.
What's the 36, 37 number mean?
That is the school year.
Okay.
Halfway through, let's say 61, 62, we're at 180% at the elementary school, 178 at the intermediate school, 133 at the middle school, and 149 at the high school. So this is shows those housing trends continue, and you keep building those 40 or 60 units a year. Looking toward the end, 2101 to 102, we have kind of decreased again because a lot of those homes have reached maturity. They've already gone through the yield model. We've decreased a little bit, but we are still strapped for space.
That seems like that's a really long time in the future. Again, I'm just trying to wrap my mind over some near-term
It
thing.
is.
I guess I'm surprised that we don't need a school for 10 years. I mean, in 10 years from now, we're still at 100%.
That's going to change. Those are based on the recommended that we gave you the first time around using just those trends.
So without any additional home build? Or that's with 20 homes a year?
No, that's just looking at the actual birth data compared to the actual historical enrollment. This is the model that we're going to change, that we're going to update. I probably shouldn't have even put that on the slide.
So it does not include new builds? No,
This would not at all, because it would inherently include new builds, but this is using the cohort survival methodology.
Right.
That only includes the live birth and the historical enrollment.
But it's not using the kindergarten data from this year either.
Correct. It's based on last year's trends.
But
Which-
cohort survival would have some new home build.
Correct.
built
Inherently,
into
it
it.
was.
It would have the historical 20 homes a year kind of.
Yep.
Right, so the top is 20 homes a year. If we have more than that, then we could get more tapped out capacity.
Yes, but because you're starting that new trend, that new kindergarten trend, we think you're starting a new trend of more kindergartners and more. We are going to update that, so just like you will likely see a lot more red in that one moving forward. And then what does this mean for seats? Again, this one's less important to pay attention to because that will change, but this one down here, let's look at the 50s. So 20, 51, 52, we're looking at a deficit of over 500 seats at the elementary level. At the intermediate, we're looking at a deficit of 375, middle school 112, and 341. So you will still need more space according to this model.
But we would anyway, if you look at the top model, because we've got the negatives up there.
Yeah, we are.
Can you please go back to the previous slide? So this is saying 21, 22, we're at 100% capacity in Granville Intermediate, but earlier it said 95?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I think we use different enrollment. I use student data. I use the student data like actual students on the map, whereas they used official enrollment.
Yeah.
And they differ because my export was from the spring and the official enrollment from October.
Okay, so which one is accurate? 95% capacity or 100% capacity for GIS?
In the GIS,
Yeah.
I counted students on the map who lived in the district.
Okay.
The official enrollment that the cohort methodology used was from October, it's from a different day, so the numbers are not going to match.
Okay.
I would say they're both accurate, although if you had a big influx of students last year throughout the year, then I would get the students on the map.
It could be the kind of bubble classes, you know, you get one class moving in a little higher, you could get 20 or 30 kids difference between different grades,
Yeah.
and things like that, so. I guess it's particularly scary to look at the further out data, because it's a lot of red, right? But it's also a lot of, I shouldn't say it's beyond what we should be considering, but it's pretty far out there. You know, when you're thinking about like, oh my gosh, this is 15 years out, I'd almost rather not focus on that now, right? Because I think people are really wondering about what's gonna happen in the near term, but not many people are wondering that far out in the future. So I don't know how to filter this data or present it in a way that, you know, we're not just thinking about, oh my gosh, you know, 40 years from now, we're gonna have to build a lot of schools, right? I think more granularity at the nearer term would be beneficial for our thought process in terms of what we actually do.
Well, it looks pretty clear that we'll need a new intermediate school or something to solve that within the
Well,
next 5 years.
We've always known that though, right? I mean, we always, incremental growth, we know we're gonna need another school in 5 years or so. That's always been kind of a part of the trend, right? And we've had a plan for that. But I think now we need to think about like, well, what's beyond incremental growth? And how do we do that? So I think the scenario planning that we do around additional builds over the next 5 or 10 years needs to drive this. And so I think those different scenarios, like the 20s, the 40s, the 60 kids a year, or houses or whatever it is.
Sure, and something I do want to point out really quick, I don't think we can't ignore the next 5 to 10 years. That is not what I'm saying by any means. So look, these are the projections, okay? This is the model that we are going to make a change to. We projected 146, and that was based on that birth data and the historical enrollment. We know that's wrong. We know that it's closer to 180, and as soon as I change that, every single year is going to change. All the kindergarten years are going to change. So, yes, we look like we're okay right now, but as soon as we get the new model updated and corrected, it is going to show likely red in the next 10 years.
And what, maybe Mr. Brown, you're the best one to answer this. What is the, I guess, time frame if we're saying, I'm just being hypothetical, we're gonna need a new school in 3 years, 4 years? I mean, what?
You're already late.
Okay, that's what I'm trying, that's what I'm trying to determine is, what is the time frame from, we're gonna need a school, you know, we gotta pass a bond, complete the construction. Right,
You gotta
right.
pass a bond, you gotta convince a community, you have to go through the architectural process and then go through the build process. So you're talking, you know, a 5-year process at the minimum. That's, and if you have the land, you can probably truncate that slightly. Yeah, 3, yeah, but you're pushing, right? Especially, I think the other thing that I don't necessarily know how to wrap my arms around right now is when we go to replace an HVAC unit and we go through the procurement process in February, and they're not projecting completion until December, where typically we could get that done in a month or 2, and now they're projecting 8 months. Construction processes are going to elongate. And, you know, because procurement will be slower and getting materials will be slower. So that, I don't understand how that's going to impact yet, the entire cycle. But I think the one thing that I think we have to consider and factor in is this is a model, right? You change one number, that kindergarten number, and everything else changes. So when you go back to that kindergarten class that was supposed to be 149, and we have 183 in seats right now, that over time changes the entire model. That class of first graders that's 200 right now, as they matriculate through our school district, they're going to be a very large class. So, you know, the class of 22, 23 kindergartners, you know, they do push into that, or come close to that 36, 37 end date. You know, so you have to think of it in 12-year, 13-year increments from a school perspective too. So all of those things factor into building the understanding of what is going to be the potential. The other thing is that land acquisition needs to occur sooner rather than later. If land is being bought up, you have to do something to make sure that you have space to put buildings. So those are some things think about now in the immediate because we know it's gonna come. And it might seem, I mean, again, 100 years, you're right. I'm not gonna be worried about it at that point, but I do believe that, you know, your planning now sets them up for success or challenges. So it is really our obligation to look, you know, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, and say, okay, what can we do now to make that glide path a little easier over time? And those are the things that, it does kind of look a little wonky when you're talking 20, 30 years out. You actually have to think that way. Yeah. But I do agree, Thomas, from the standpoint of just getting a better understanding in the short term and looking at those yields will help us better understand what the urgency is. And I think that's the level of urgency is one of the things that we're hoping to drive. And, you know, data is better in trends. So, you know, doing this data over 3 years is going to give us a very clear picture. But I think we have to be thinking about what is the immediate need right now based on what we know might be the 5-year process that we need to undergo.
So this is fantastic data for the strategic task force, really, because we've got a group of, 30 super engaged community members that have seen all kinds of development in real estate, and they're super experts, right? To help us kind of make these decisions about, do we put 20 in, do we put 40, 60, and how do we do that? And there's enough people that are, again, great real estate people and have seen a lot of communities develop. But although it's hard for me to think in the even 12, 13-year time frame, that's what we have to think about.
Yeah.
Right? It's even harder in a 20-year time frame. But we've got a really unique opportunity right now to make some fundamental decisions, whether it be getting some land or figuring out where the schools are going to go, or making sure the finances are sustainable in a long-term way that will position Granville for very long-term success.
Yeah. And Karen, can you go back to the slide that has the by unit? One more. Yeah, so just look at 2000 to 2005. You know, we were looking at 40 and 60 units. If you start adding 100 units, again, just like that kindergarten number, everything changes as well. So the number of units per year really drives density. And that's important to keep in the back of your mind as well. And there were units where we approached 100 for a couple of years. So that one big potential track can change the whole dynamic. And that's the volatility that I want the board to recognize. And those are the risks inherent in projections. Just like the 5-year forecast, you know, we identify the risks and assumptions. The same methodology applies here. You know, these are statistical models that can adjust, and you know, a pandemic, a housing market crash, an intel, you know, all can kind of create volatility in this, but it's good to understand what the magnitude of volatility is, the potential of that volatility. Does that make sense? Okay, that's great.
It seems really clear, though, as of now, that we should start thinking about acquiring the land, because if it's a 5-year process and we're almost maxed out at GDS and GIS, I feel like, how do we get that, like, is this the time we start talking about land acquisition?
I think let's let the strategic planning group, you know, work through the data, make some recommendations to you, because I think that this is a community process, and they need to understand, a lot of those people need to understand this information so that they can communicate it more broadly. But I think this is the first step in having a conversation about future growth. But in short order, that conversation needs to switch to tactical and strategic and making some decisions. So it's not a long runway of getting understanding of the data. It's a relatively short runway, and we'll have to start making some decisions clear.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking of the cost of land increasing with Intel coming, so it'd be wise to do that within the next couple of years.
Yes.
Before it, really goes up even more.
Yes.
Can you remind me, what year was the intermediate school built?
2001? 2002.
Okay, so right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And this is just my last slide, this is the same information, just shown unmasked, because I thought it was pretty. So, same information as before, but I like looking at it this way.
You mentioned you had some data on potentially move in versus move out and so forth, and how we can understand that, because it's something that's been speculated a lot on, that people consume the product and then leave or not, depending on who you talk to and so forth. How do we wrap our minds around that so we can make
I can
intentional decisions
send
there?
you the data set. The only limitation with it is I can't make up personal data from the past. So in the data set that I have, it tells me when a home was sold, how much it was sold for, and who it was sold for, like the owner name or something like that. So I can compare that with current year students, and next year, once I get new parcel data, I can certainly compare it then, but the county doesn't give me old
You
data.
can't do historical home transaction data?
I have 3 different transactions within it, but it's so sporadic, it would show me all sorts of different data sets because I only have 1 year of student data. I can't, if I don't have the same year with the same year, it kind of messes things up. So next year, I can certainly do that. If you guys have last year's student data, I may be able to pull Licking County's data because I think I have it.
So you compare like address of student to address of home sold? So we give you address data for students and you compare that and you put that in the model?
Yeah, so the way I made this was I put every student on the map, every student is on my map, and I have no information about them, but they're a dot, and
Yeah.
I can see what parcel they live in, how much that parcel was sold for, what year it was sold for, and that's how I've done that. Now, the trend that I'm showing with the move-in data for just 1 year, it is impactful. You can really see the younger kids are the ones that are moving, that are coming in.
Historically, we've had a lot of kids move in kind of midway through as well, into high school and so forth. That's kind of my impression as we sort of have some bigger classes.
Depends also years.
Yeah, maybe that's not a super trend or whatever, but it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not to say that we certainly have older students moving in too, but the majority of them, as soon as I put a conditional formatting on them, the red was all with like kindergarten and first grade, with those students that are coming in.
If there's a way to get student historical data that matches up with this, I think it'd be really interesting to kind of further that analysis of like, can kids graduate, do their parents move out or not? Right, and that's, again, it's been speculated a lot, and I'd love to, I don't know if there's a way to compare with other districts or see if that's typical or whatever, but it's important strategically for as we kind of think about different models to figure out like what's the right thing for the community, so we have balance, and so we kind of like, I hate to use the term flatten the curve, right? But in some ways, like, make a sustainable community that like continues over time, it's not just a big bubble that causes other problems,
Correct, yeah.
right?
Yeah, if you give me the student data, I might be able to pull last year's.
You could do it with the data, if you could get the historical data, you can see. You could, well, I mean, there are taxation ways. For example, if you applied a taxation methodology that didn't tax retirees, for example, right, as much as the property values, you might be able to change the balance of sustainability of people in the community, right, which is one of the things we talked about with income tax, right? If income tax does not impact those that are later in their careers or lives, there's more of a chance that they will stay, right? It just is it's not a direct linkage, and we don't certainly have control of that, but it's something I think as a community, we need to think about, like, how do we provide that? Like, one way you could do it, you could go age-limited housing, like maybe Granville needs more 55-plus housing, right? Maybe.
Is this stuff for the school district?
Yeah, sure, yeah, as long as they're supportive of the levy, right?
Yes,
Right?
yes.
But those are just things I think that would be interesting, because I hear it talked about a lot, and we haven't had any data on it. And it's kind of neat that this is fantastic math and models that can be done to really ferret out some insights about the community.
Well, I think, so the strategic planning group is looking at this data. They're looking at, fiscal data, like you referenced, Thomas. They're going to be looking at, economic development options. They're going to look at programming issues and thinking about the future. I mean, one of the things, there's a lot of different programming options that we haven't necessarily considered because we don't have space. So there are things that get put on the table when you start talking about future building opportunities. But the strategic planning group really has to look at all 5 categories in a holistic way to better understand and plan, for the future in a prudent manner. And so any one of those things in isolation can be detrimental to the strategic planning process if you don't look at all of the pieces together. And so it's important to continue to circle this information back. This is relevant data. I mean, our business is about, students. And so this is an absolute critical piece of information, but it's one piece of, an equation that we need to kind of work through as a community. And so that strategic planning group will be meeting on Wednesday to kind of go through. There is a lot of detail that you didn't share that's in the detailed reports that will have, will be able to take a deeper dive into. And they'll be, relevant and available to the community who's interested. But again, I think this high-level summary is important to understand, us thinking around this information long-term and building that trend understanding. So,
It's coming.
yeah.
Growth is coming.
Yes. We're, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and you're doing this analysis for the districts around the area and things like that, right? Because there's unique to Granville, right? And probably even more growth is going to be coming to some of the other communities around that don't have the foresight or the planning or the overall strategic plan that I think we do here. So I'm just really fortunate and thankful to all the people on the task force, right, that help us out, and thankful that we're able to do these analyses ahead of time instead of getting stuck with like, oh my gosh, we did it school next year, right? Because that's not the way things work. So we need to set all the plans up for that.
And maybe this comparison, because I remember the board kind of, when we looked at Chandler, Arizona, in 1970 versus now, okay? That's kind of the same time frame that we're talking about. And they were farm fields, and then they were very dense, communities within a 40-year period. They are a really good example of what could potentially happen with the anomaly of intel. And it is an anomaly. I mean, it is not, you don't have intels everywhere. So we have to really look at where they've been before and the impact on the environment around them. And so embracing that process of planning is going to be really important for future success. And looking at it not only in 10-year chunks, but 10, 20, 30, 40 years is going to be really important.
I'm going to make a quick plug for a meeting next Monday, which is a Rotary-sponsored meeting where yourself and Herb Kohler will be.
And Brittany.
Right,
Yes.
together talking, not just about enrollment growth and things like that, but really about all that's happening potentially with growth.
Sure.
And so I'm going to make a plug for that. It's a public meeting, and I think there's invitations out there through Rotary or
Yeah.
Facebook or something like that. That's to think more about what happens with the space and the transportation and commercial development and so forth in addition to schools. So it's great that we've got a lot of great community partners to think of this together.
Yeah. So, we came out of a pandemic, and one of the taglines during the pandemic was, our COVID plan is not written in pen, it's written in pencil. We're sharpening the pencil again in looking at this information. And, we'll put a fine point to it, but it's going to take a little bit of time and digestion to really put a cogent plan together for the future. But it will happen because that's what we are tasked to do.
And we do this work all over the country. I didn't want to scare you, but you are doing all the right things right now. You're paying attention to enrollment, you're looking at it, there's a lot more enrollment coming, you're planning for it. So don't think it is a lot of information, but don't think you're not doing the right things. You certainly are. The perfect time to do it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I guess, no. All right, our next report is our monthly financial report with Brittany.
for July. So first looking at our cash balance for July of this year compared to July of last year, we are about $5 million above where we were last year. And this is, again, really due to the carryover cash balance that we had last year. So as you know, our revenue is not equal to our expenditure in any given year. It's the levy cycle. We build up cash, we spend that down, and try to make that last as long as possible. So that happens on an annual basis. It also happens on a monthly basis, as you can see here, the trend. It doesn't come in evenly throughout the fiscal year either. So we build our cash up at the high point in August, and then spend that down in December and build back up again. So I just wanted to show that on a monthly basis, and then also bring us back to showing that on an annual basis as well. Just so that we understand that concept of building the cash balance and the levy cycle and extending that as long as possible. So this graph shows, I've updated 2022 to actual numbers. So this shows our total actual revenue compared to actual expenditures. And that's the growing cash that you're seeing reflected in the monthly numbers. Then the lines represent the cash, the green line being with the levy renewal included, the red line being without the levy. So a significant difference when we get out to 2026 without that income tax renewal. Also, and I'll speak to this more when we get to the later slides, a lot of this cash balance is due to obviously the income tax and how that's performing, and then also the ESSER dollars and other COVID dollars that we've received. Those two combined have set us into this positive trend. So since we are just in July, this is the first month of the fiscal year, so we just have 1 month of data to look at. We don't have year-to-date numbers yet, as they're the same as the monthly numbers. So looking at revenue for the month of July compared to last July, local taxes are up. This $457,000, that includes the property tax advances as well as the income tax payment that we received. So I don't really think that's all due to income tax increase. Only 6.5% of that is related to increase in the income tax. The other is really just timing issues between funds. Then all other revenue, that $857,000, that's an increase in the return of advance payments to the ESSER funds. So that's not real cash, it's just an accounting adjustment that we have to make on both the revenue and expenditure side. Then looking at July expenditures, salary and benefits are up due to steps and base increases that we always have. And then all other expenses includes the first of the HVAC payments for the high school. So Jeff alluded to that project earlier and the procurement process and how long that has taken. So this is just one payment in that. And we typically don't have capital outlay expenditures in the operating fund. We typically have that in permanent improvement. But when you have a $1.6 million HVAC project come up in 1 year, we've pulled from multiple sources. So we have some in the operating fund, as you see here, and then we have some in the ESSER dollars that we were able to utilize as well. So, on to COVID-related funds. So I just wanted to show this graph again. As a reminder, we received in total just under $3 million in COVID-related funds. So that includes like the coronavirus relief funds from the township, both of those allocations that they were able to provide to us. That includes the IDEA and preschool funds. That includes all of the ESSER and ARP dollars. So that includes everything. But the big thing to keep in mind is that these are restricted funds and can only be used for specific purposes outlined in the law. So mainly related to responding to COVID. So we could not just use them all to offset existing expenses, but we did where we could. So that is what has helped us also stretch our cash balance as long as possible. So you can see here a large portion has been devoted to flooring, HVAC projects, as well as furniture. And also wanted to mention that those kindergarten classrooms, creating additional space, we were able to use ESSER dollars there as well. Then staffing, a lot of that is related to learning loss recovery. So intervention positions, summer intervention, as well as building subs. And then the other largest component is, of course, cleaning supplies. So of all of the sources that we started off with COVID-related funding, we have 4 remaining that we are still spending down. And of those 4 sources, primarily what we have left to spend is on the remaining HVAC project at the elementary and the intervention position at the elementary as well. This is just so that you guys have it, so I expect you to read that from the slide.
So $3 million is roughly the COVID funds that we've received
Yes.
over the last couple of years and been able to use against both permanent improvement as well as operating funds.
Correct. Yep.
Which-
So cash reconciliation, just want to point out that we have the red train investment that started off at $5 million, that's up in the positive now, so we are earning on that, and then we invested, since our cash balance allowed for us to invest another $3 million, so we have that will show up on the August report as well. And then I have more to share on that in a couple of slides. So we have this credit card report. This is required of us semi-annually. Our compliance officer, Jeff, has to sign off on this. He would not be the treasurer, so by default, I'm nominating Jeff. But really all it is validating that our active accounts are actual employees and that our limits are within our policy, and just acknowledgement of our rewards received, which we don't receive rewards. So that is an opportunity for the future. And then another kind of compliance item for this month, this is something that the auditors look for annually. And since we have commercial paper now, I'm sharing it with you for the first time. And this just shows our purchases and sales of commercial paper. And this is where we're seeing where a majority of our funds with Red Tree are invested. And so I believe the rate is about 2.4, but as these mature, their rates have gone up, so they're earning more than that as they mature and get reinvested. So that is just another compliance item for the auditors, something that we have to report on annually.
Commercial paper is very short term, isn't it? As opposed to something like a
Yeah.
CD or so forth?
Yeah.
And do they kind of pick a range of different maturities effectively to manage that portfolio?
Yep, exactly. All right, that is all I have.
Thank you. Okay. We've reached the time in our agenda where we welcome public comments. So if there's anyone that would like to speak to the board, please step up to the podium and feel free to speak up for 5 minutes. State your name and address, and we'd love to hear from you. Seeing none, we also welcome public comment through emails or phone calls or tap on our shoulder and things like that. So please continue to speak up. We're really excited to hear from our community every chance we get. But officially next on the agenda is our board discussion. Yeah. You want to hear?
Yeah, so obviously, there's a lot of information that Cooperative Strategies just digested. Again, it's an opportunity for us to highlight the fact that there is a group of 35 community members that are going to be poring over more of that data in a strategic planning process. They've been utilizing data from the village, from the chamber, economic development conversations. This is another piece of data that they're going to, consider in thinking about the strategic plan for, the future of Granville schools. So, and it really is,
it's not a strategic plan academically. There are some programming components, but it's really more of a facility plan over the next, couple of years in Granville schools. So, and what we might consider. So, what I would like to know is if there are any other pieces of data or any questions that you still have. Obviously, I might not be able to answer them perfectly, but if you have any questions that you want us to go to cooperative strategies, I've been working with them behind the scenes. I've been asking questions and getting additional data, but if there's anything else that you would like to see in the future, please let me know.
I think if there's some work that can be done just to reformat the nearer term, right? I think displaying both near term and long term, which are important, right, might help me get my mind around it because it's just hard to think that far out in the future. And I think it's just a slight reformatting of the data that they have, as well as if there's any way to dig back in our history or use that data to think about this, people in some of the schools that leave, and I don't know if that's something we can just get from them right now because it's not that much of analysis. I think it'd be interesting to hear. But I think the most important thing is engaging the community with this, right? And our strategic task force is a fantastic next group to engage with. But I think there's a lot of folks that, like every time, I think I'm right this I think I've seen all the thing, I've read all the reports, I've talked to a bunch of people and so forth. Every time you hear it, it's like, oh my gosh, it's real. Oh my gosh, it's coming, and so forth. And so I think that, having the community feedback on helping us make appropriate plans and helping us make assumptions is going to be really critical, because we do need to do some things relatively short term, and there are important strategic things that need to happen starting now.
Yeah, I feel like we're almost, I just really feel like I want to get on top of purchasing of land, and we know that we're going to need a new building, at least one pretty soon, but I'm feeling a little bit anxious about the unknowns, because we could potentially have 2,000 more students for the next 30 years, or potentially 5,000 more students. And so it's like, how much land, where do we build, which campuses do we combine, or are we going to restructure the grades?
Yeah, so all those are really good thoughts, and those are some of the conversations that we'll have in the strategic planning process, but ultimately that strategic planning process brings to you some thoughts as a board governance team. And so you'll have the opportunity to weigh in as well and steer that process with your feedback through the process. But ultimately, things are going to have to change. What that change looks like, where you talk about grade configurations and other things like that, those are the types of things that we have to socialize and make sure people understand that, things might not always look exactly the way that they do right now, but we're going to maintain the academic, athletic, and arts perspective in Granville schools, which is aligned with our portrait of a graduate, our mission statement, and all the wonderful things that we do on a regular basis. But yeah, don't panic yet, all right?
I just feel like something that I've had to learn as a school board member is that we are the higher level thinkers. It's not naturally my talent, so I'm continuing to work on it. But so when I start thinking about those details, I also start to panic. But then I say, wait a minute, we've got these 30 community members and a million other community members that are willing to put in that, their experience and their efforts in that, and then bring those recommendations to us. And so I think, while I agree with Thomas that I also would like to see things, a little bit more short-term, I think as responsible board members, we have to be thinking about those board members and those children who are going to be here in 30 years. And when we talk to our friends and family and people in our community, one of the things I think to keep in mind is to understand how we all come to this new opportunity and this new growth. Because some of us are coming from being here for generations, others are much newer, and how do you feel about that growth? How do you want that growth to look? So that kind of higher level is where I'm trying to keep my brain, and then trusting that Jeff and do the other things. Even though, as Karen, I don't remember her last name, was speaking, part of me was like, the teachers, what about the teachers? What do they think? You know, but, so my question really is, do you have any idea when, and again, I don't want to rush it, but when do you think the planning group would kind of bring information to us in a?
I would say sometime in the spring,
Okay. Okay.
so.
But it's gonna be a constantly evolving process.
It's gonna be
Oh,
evolving.
yeah, they're meeting every week, or
Right.
maybe not every week, but they're meeting, yeah.
And I think what's gonna have to happen, and maybe I didn't say this well, but we're gonna get information along the way that is going to potentially change the direction that we go. So we also have to be a little bit nimble, but there are some things that will be written in pen because we'll have to make decisions on. And so we're just gonna have to keep an open mind and keep factoring in new information as it's available. I mean, just think about the context of, initially what Intel planned was 2 fabs, okay? Now that's 8 to 10. That changes the whole metric. A kindergarten class changes the whole metric. Little subtleties have huge ripple effects when you're thinking that long down the road.
And we're talking like huge developmental differences, differences in the amount of development we have.
Sure.
So that's not even like a small ripple effect thing. And we're looking like the Heath Union Township situation and some of the other divisions or annexation, or like if the 5 acres per home changes somehow down the road. These are huge factors that'll just completely change what.
Well, yeah, I think, Rhonda, to that point, all you have to do is look at River Road, and, at one point there were 2 properties that were under significant discussion with developers. One is being developed, the other is not right now, but it is still in, Newark's boundary, Granville schools. That one piece of land is 150 acres. And so you talk about park trails and the impact in the number of units that came out of that 5-year span, that could happen relatively quickly. And again, little points could change dramatically our timelines. And so I think Karen's perspective is we're doing the right things, we're gaining a better understanding of the information. But one of the things that I appreciated about this board over the 12 years that I've been here is that you have been decisive. You've been long-range planners. You have made hard decisions. And I think that is admirable and going to be even more necessary in the next 10 years. So
That's another thing that's kind of super key, is to be collaborative, right? And I'm so encouraged that our task force involves all of the townships surrounding us and other school districts as well. And I think that, as a broader community, we need to think very regionally about where things fit, and about, transportation, and about traffic, and about school districts, and about development and so forth. And I'm really encouraged that we've maintained that kind of outlook, because I see a lot of stress on a lot of municipalities and districts and things like that. When stress comes, there's a lot of, when growth like this comes, there's natural stresses that can be a problem. And I feel like we're doing a great job of collaborating, and I think that's going to be super key to bringing out of this ahead. And in reality, I think, Granville and Granville schools for sure are going to come out shining. I mean, this is like, we've been doing this for 200 years, right? We've had great education for 200 years. It's a whole lot different than it was 5, 10, 50, 100 years ago, right? But we've been progressing and keeping the culture that is the glue of this community. So that's great.
Something I gleaned from this is the growth of that kindergarten from what we projected to what it turned out to be. That shows to me, regardless of what Intel did, it's something that we needed to discuss. And it was on our table, and maybe the whole Intel, well, not maybe, I think that accelerates it, but that change really stood out to me Because if they're coming in kindergarten, unless, I mean, my experience has been unless there's a job transfer or something to move, they're gonna wanna stay here. And that's a compliment to our school district and our community. But and I agree, Cecile, I think we need to look for the future and be prepared. But there's, I don't wanna say a sense of urgency, but right there, regardless of what Intel does, it's obvious that folks wanna be in the school system. That's why our family moved here, was because of the school system, and I'm so happy we did. So I think that, I can't emphasize enough, that number really caught my attention, that it's happening now. And I'm really glad Karen brought that up, that they started out with certain perspective and numbers, and as you mentioned, Mr. Brown, that can change like that. So I'm glad that the cooperative strategies is aware of that, and the communication is good, and they're going to have to make adjustments as we go forward. And I am looking forward to seeing what the recommendations are and other folks in the community, their input on this.
Just a couple of things I'll highlight real quick that we heard this evening. One is I think we really managed this COVID thing well, right? Not only did we get the federal funds and collaborate with the township and the village to get those and apply them to the expenses that we had, you know, even our cafeteria services have flourished through the process, you know, by utilizing those funds, and now more kids are going to eat this good, healthy food. So there's a couple of great things there. But really at the core of it is like the great education, right? And to have two teachers with us here to be recognized and to see all that goes on behind the scenes, to do that was fantastic. I'm really pumped up this time of year, right? The beginning of the school year is particularly exciting. You know, the principals know I can walk around the schools just because it's fun to see the shiny floors and the smiling kids at the beginning of the year. We had a fantastic convocation. I know a couple of folks couldn't be there, and most of the community doesn't get a chance to benefit from that. But when the band plays and you hear about the plans and stuff like that, it's really fantastic. Jeff, would you be willing to just talk a little bit about what happened at convocation in terms of your address to the staff? I think it'd be interesting for the community at large and the other board members. It's really a neat restart.
Sure, I'd like to spend about 3 hours. No.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Giving you a tutorial. Yeah, I'll give you the summary. We talked a lot about the purpose of schools. And, you know, over the last 30 years, the purpose of schools somewhat changed in the age of accountability to a prioritization of content and test scores. And prior to that, you know, the purpose of schools were really centering on spaces for human development. And when you think differently about, you know, what the purpose of school is, and you think about the challenges that we had during the pandemic, it really does become clear that we have to orient more towards schools being a space for human development. And that means that we're relational, we're putting kids at the center, you know, we encourage risk-taking and failure, and we engage students differently in the content that we are required to teach. And so we just had a little bit of a conversation about that, and in the context of our Portrait of a Graduate and the road and journey that we've been on to highlight those 6 competencies that we believe make Blue Aces, you know, future ready. And we're excited about getting back to that work after, you know, a couple of years of having to prioritize some other things.
So thanks for your leadership in that. It just really feels great. This is going to be a great school year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else from a board discussion perspective? Anybody attend meetings or things like that of other organizations, support groups? My night or the Off the Races was good this year and so forth.
Yeah, it was a very, very good event, well attended, well organized, so it was a fun event.
Great.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about something that a constituent reached out to me about.
I would suggest first you address that with Jeff, just give him a quick
Okay.
note or something like that, or if there's more that the full board needs to do, we'll put it on the agenda or at least have it
Yeah, okay. All right, that takes us to our action agenda. All right, action item 10.01 is the board policy adoption.
So moved.
Second.
And if you remember, we actually did the first reading way back in June. We didn't approve these in July, so it's been a while. But any questions about those board policies? No?
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Next is the approval of a contract with Learning Inspired.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and Learning Inspired, specifically Dr. Mike Nicholson is our thought partner in looking at how to build self-determined learning within our instructional toolbox. So he's working with the administration, staff, and students this year on that work.
I'm not sure if I gave an update since I got to attend a retreat session that any of our staff members were at and so forth. It's inspirational. It's just really cool curriculum stuff, right? That's going to make an enormous difference for our kids long term. So thank you, Mike and Jeff, for leading that.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Thank you. Next is 10.03, approval of resolution to purchase school bus.
So moved. Second.
I always wanted to buy a school bus.
Can't live in it.
Okay. All right, so actually, the next item also is related to the purchase of the school bus, but you can see that we are purchasing through the Meta Consortium to get the best pricing.
So moved.
That's already.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and go to that first
Yep.
one, and then we'll need a motion for a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Excellent. Next, item 10.04 is the approval of the resolution with Meta to purchase the bus.
So moved.
Second.
Why are there two motions for this?
Because we have to be a part of their program.
Yeah. So the
Isn't that
purchase is for last year, really. And then this resolution is for this coming year in the event that we want to purchase another bus.
Oh, okay, so this is.
Because they have to
joining
kind
the
of
thing
gauge
again, right.
interest, because
Yeah.
they bid it out, they have to
Yeah.
gauge
Yeah.
interest of like how many buses people might be interested in buying.
And we're just on a cycle when we replace them when they get old, and we don't want to do them all at the same time, and so
Yeah.
forth. and-
Yeah, we typically have one purchase budgeted each year in the PI.
This is plural here, but one here, so are we just getting, is that the price for one?
It's just
Yeah.
the price
Purchase
for
of one school bus?
Okay.
Okay, roll please.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye. Next is the approval of the agreement for Pepsi Bottling Company.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a contract with Pepsi to be our provider for concessions and the cafeteria and other areas, so it's just an annual contract.
Are there state or federal guidelines
There are.
telling us what we can and can't put in?
Absolutely.
But not for concessions, just for,
Correct.
okay,
Just during the school hours.
thank you.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Excellent. Next is the appointment of our delegate to the OSBA annual business meeting. Rana.
Second. We do have to fill in.
We have to
need
fill in,
names, so
so-
we have a motion second.
Rana, would you like to be our delegate?
I would be honored.
Excellent. All right.
So moved.
We have to have an alternate in the event that Ronnie cannot attend. So,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
It's on a week, it is on a weekday and you teach, so
Yeah.
you're out.
the other three have said that they would attend, so.
Yeah.
So you're welcome.
Put me down as all.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can have a motion.
But we really want Rana.
Yes, we do. Mr. Wolf has attended.
That's right.
It's inspiring.
So we have a,
Motion,
from, Amy,
And a second.
from Cecile.
Thank you.
Good old days.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
And thank you, Rana, for being our delegate.
That's a great event. I mean, we should all be going to that and so forth. And then too, there's a luncheon part of it as well and so forth, so. we're
Okay.
going to be in there.
Next is 11.01 A through D.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So we have our typical consent items. I would call your attention to the donation of the temperature globes from Licking Memorial Health Systems. That looks at what is the heat and humidity in, for like band practice and athletic competitions to make sure that our students don't get heat stroke. We also have the start of the Theron Rogers Scholarship Fund, which we're, happy to support for the Rogerson family. And some other donations from Granville Arts Booster that Andy mentioned earlier, and the athletic boosters for seniors. We also have quite a few classified employees. Notice the number of bus drivers, which is a good thing. Thank you, Tanya, for always going out and beating the bushes to get new employees. We appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
And the rest of the items are relatively typical.
I'm just curious, who takes care of the scholarships? I know GEF have their own program, but
Yeah, so they're kind of scattered throughout the different entities. So the district has a handful, and so we were approached, really the boosters were, but this one is more similar to some other ones that we have as athletics. So as far as that process goes, it made sense for the district to house this one. It's going to be kind of long-term. They want to be able to do it, award it for 19 years. So for something like that, where the money's coming in up front over a period of time, it made sense for the district to kind of run that. There are some that are through the boosters, there are some that are through GEF. So it kind of has to do with where the money came from initially and kind of who owned it. So it's appropriate to have it in various places, but this one just kind of made sense to land with the district, so.
and then they take care of how it is here now.
Yeah.
Yes, so they have been in communication with Josh to be part of that selection process and have some criteria, so that this one will be awarded to, I believe, a track athlete each year, and $2,000 for hopefully 19 years. So you may see more donations come through to build that fund a little bit as well.
Great. Okay, any more questions on the consent agenda? We take a roll then.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, item 12.01, approval of the July 2022 financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Any more questions on that? Thank you for that. I think that's it.
Okay. Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Meeting adjourned.